Hey guys, I'm learning TFT. In this video, I'm going to share with you a discussion that Grea had with the TFT Plus coaching group. Grea is currently rank 7 right now. He's very knowledgeable in TFT. Also similar to Rain, the analysis I did yesterday, he has only played 372 games and is rank 7 and is consistently one of the most efficient players as far as games played. Um, and lots of top players respect him a ton. So he did a breakdown of the conditional lines that you can take and knowledge checks. So by default, a lot of times top players will say these comps are unconditional lines that you can take. So let's say Scrap right now is an S tier unconditional comp. You can angle towards that direction every game. But for top players, if you really want to climb, you can't force the unconditional line every game if it's not ideal circumstances. And there are specific scenarios, whether that's by augments, artifacts, specific starts in the game, where there are certain conditions that need to be met. But if those conditions are met, there can be some pretty big advantages that you can gain. So that's what Grea calls conditional lines and knowledge checks. So I'll give you a brief teaser into that. I'm going to go through some of my recent match history learnings, and the meta mindset of the day I'm going to cover is optimism. If you want to jump straight to the Grea's talk, I'll provide a timestamp in the description below. So I'll give you a brief teaser really quick. So as far as non-hero augments go, these are the scenarios that Grea identifies as having extreme value as a knowledge check. So Trait Tracker leads into Scrap extremely well. It gives you 6 emblems, which is the equivalent of 600 shield if you have 6 Scrap. Too much value can be played into a lot of different 2-cost reroll options that Grea breaks down. So lots of different options here. Dumbify and Golemify makes scaling units more viable. They're also very good if you have a Rage Blade or Archangel slammed. Rigged Shop with 3-cost reroll is very good, specifically around Swain 3, Nami 3 with either 4 Emissary Sork or 6 Sork. Moonlight and Greater Moonlight is extremely strong with Zyra, which you can play on either 6 Sork or 4 Emissary Sork. Unleash the Beast with Urgot reroll. Exalted Adventure, since 2-cost reroll is good right now. And Investment Strategy, particularly if you're on an Econ encounter or an extra gold opener, is good with Sentinels. He also goes into hero augments, how to play them, artifacts, and which scenarios it makes sense to go into them. So that's a teaser into Grea's talk. I'll first go into my match history learnings. This is a new thing I'm doing to track at least one learning from every bot 4 that I have. So first learning is commit fast on 2-1 for augment selection and call a reroll line to minimize the odds of someone contesting. So in this spot, I already have a Sterax here, and I have Unleash the Beast, which we just saw with Grea's conditional lines that Urgot reroll is very good with this line. And I paused and kind of scouted the lobby to see if anybody was going to go Urgot, and I took a little bit too long, and I didn't see anybody doing Urgot, so I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then what happened was that someone else, I didn't see any contesters, but then eventually someone took Portable Forge and took Innervating Locket with Urgot, and I ended up having to play a contested game, which eventually I just pivoted into, I hit an early Vi, so I just pivoted into Enforcers, and I think I ended up like a 4th or 5th. So I salvaged the game somewhat, but I think my AVP would have been a lot higher if I just instant click this and like typed in Urgot right away. So commit fast, call reroll. Number 2, critically think about how to improve your board. And if you can get a huge spike with lots of outs, then roll, especially on stage 4. So in this case, this is 4-2. I took reinforcement and I hit an Elise. So at this point, I have a Swain backline, and I was like, okay, this board's reasonably strong. I can slam a Black Rose emblem. Um, but I have so many outs here because first off, I have one dead unit here, another semi-dead unit here, and I have a Zyra on bench, so I just need to hit one Zoe for 6 Sork, and I can swap out these two. Or I have a Cassiopeia on bench. I could hit a, what is it, Morgana, and swap out these two for 2 Black Rose, plus this, then I get 5 Black Rose. What other outs do I have? And I kind of panic sold Nunu. I can also hit LeBlanc. Like, that's super high roll. I think if you roll something like 50 gold, you have a 30% chance of hitting a single copy of your desired 5 cost. So the odds of that are like pretty slim. But if you account for the odds of hitting 1 Morg or 1 Zoe or 1 LeBlanc, I think my odds here are pretty high off of, let's say, rolling something like 10 gold or 20 gold at most, where I would get a very large spike in my board value. Also, I have Nami pair, so I would be able to possibly hit a Nami 2. I still have a Vlad 1. So if I roll something like 20 gold, I think my odds are like something like 80% chance that I can significantly spike the power level of this board. So anytime you have that kind of efficiency with your gold for rolling, it's likely worth doing, especially in stage 4. If I could get any of those outs, and especially if I could hit multiple of those outs, I can very likely streak the whole stage 4. And when you're playing reinforcement, part of my goal in greeting was to like try to go fast 9. But one of the best ways to go fast 9 is actually preserve HP, full streak the stage, and then full streaking also gives you a ton of gold value, because that would give me 1 gold for winning here, 2 gold for winning here, so that's 3 plus another 2, 5 plus another 2, 7 gold. Versus if let's say I roll down to like 20, I might miss out on 3 gold for that interest interval, plus let's say 2 gold for the next one, 5, 1 gold. So I would roughly have about the same amount of interest that I can make as if I full win streaked here. But in the full win streak scenario, I would probably have more HP. So this was definitely a mistake to not roll at least a little bit to spike my board. Against Renata reroll Smeech 3 Scrap Echo, you really have to have anti-heal in the late game. In this scenario, I have a open cloak, open bow, open glove. And on this carousel, I have the opportunity to pick up a Zoe with cloak, which would give me a Zoe 2. And a well-needed additional tank item, though I do have a Scion 3 with 5 Black Rose. Which, by the way, I've been playing this comp a lot more, and I have a coaching session with Marcel doing a deep dive into the 6 Sork Black Rose variant, which has been performing better than the 4 Emissary version, and we learned this by watching a lot of Soju's stream, and it's been performing very well for me. So I'm going to do a video for that probably by tomorrow or maybe the day after. Anyway, I could have a Zoe 2 here, or I can have an anti-heal item in another bow. And I know my board's already pretty strong. The problem is I've been losing and I'm low on HP. But I have Slammin as well. So with Slammin, I just want to save HP because every round that I last longer, I am basically getting econ. So the other option is taking a Zyra with a bow, which I probably overvalued the gold value here. Because what ended up happening was I actually won these last 2 rounds. But I ended up in this game not having anti-heal, and I lost. I like barely got knocked out against Renata reroll, where the Renata had like this much HP left, and it was for sure anti-heal diff because they had a Singe 3 with Anima Visage. So you really gotta make sure that you have anti-heal, and in this case, I in hindsight, I think I would have won these last two fights, even if I just had a Zoe 1, because LeBlanc 1 is actually quite stable in stage 4. So foregoing the Zoe 2 for this bow on anti-heal would have actually been the right call. Which is also partly true, especially for... or never mind, forget about that point. Alright, roll with lots of pairs on bench. So this is similar to this one. If you have a lot of outs where rolling can spike your board power, it's oftentimes worth doing. So here I have Zoe pair, Nami pair, Cass pair, Morgana pair. What else? And I'm entering stage 4. I should not be carrying a Zyra 2 here, ideally. Especially with so many outs. My odds of hitting at least Nami 2 or Zoe 2. And then also I have... Is this a Swain 2? Okay, this is a Swain 2. My outs of hitting any of these is pretty high. I could also be holding like the emissaries as well. So if I roll something like 20 gold, I should be able to hit at least one of these two, if not something else that's quite strong. And going into stage 4, you should really not be carrying a 2-star 1 cost. So I'm just bleeding unnecessary value there. And the other thing is, similar to this point, if I just win fights, like if I win this fight, I get 2 gold from it. So that's the equivalent of being at 30 gold and losing 2 interests. Because if I lose just the 1 round, I gain 0 like gold from the round. So this is also an example of roll to your streak. So if you are on a streak, even if it's just a 1 streak, you're heavily incentivized to roll because winning 2 in a row gives you 1 gold from the streak plus 1 gold from winning the round, which is equivalent to being if you're at 30 gold interest. All right, so this one, I took forward thinking, which got buffed in this patch. And I was kind of panicking because I was like kind of on 1 or 2 lives here. So I didn't know how much gold I was actually going to have. But slowing down a bit here, I would have roughly around 80 gold if I pick up all of this. And what I did in this game was I went fast 9, but I had around 20 gold, no, about 15 gold or so to actually roll, which I basically ended up with nothing. Instead, what I should have done here, given that I have a Black Rose emblem, and I was missing like all the Sorks basically, and all the Black Rose units, I should have just rolled on 8, which I looked at the roll cost calculator. With 80 gold, I have a 64% chance to hit a 2-star Zoe, and a 53% chance to hit a desired 5 cost, which in this case would be LeBlanc. I already have 9 slots from this coronation, so I don't really need necessarily to just have an extra unit slot. So this was definitely a roll on 8 angle. I don't even have a Swain 2. So yeah, even if I get to level 9 and I have 15 or 20 gold, like just buying a Zoe 2 is already 12 gold, right? So like I would not be able to fill out this board with any value. So this for sure was a roll on 8 angle, stabilize hopefully on like a Zoe 2, like LeBlanc. I could get to 6 Sork, 5 Black Rose here, stabilize, and then push 9. Oh, this game, I lost to Creep Round here. And I was angling Renata reroll. Okay, so one thing is, if you're not sure if you're going to win, and here I wanted to stay at a lower level because I wanted to roll for the Singed, because there were 2 other players. There's one Zeri Sentinel reroll player and one Trist Sentinel reroll player. So it was highly unlikely that I was going to get a Rel 3. So I was like, okay, I should really just play towards Singe 3. So I wanted to stay at level 4 to roll on 3-1. But yeah, I lost by, I didn't kill 1 final unit, which probably would end up being like an extra component. So here I should, if I'm not sure, I should just roll. I have 1 Aurelia pair, Singed pair, Renata pair and Vex pair. Like I should be able to hit one of them. The other thing was I took a extra tier off Carousel here because I think tier was more contested. What I probably should have done was just taken Rod. Archangel here would have won the fight as well. So yeah, like that was a huge mistake in this game. This was actually the same game that led to this forward thinking game because I ended up not hitting like anything. So I pivoted out and tried to go angle towards Sorks. But I was also just, I think, just short a component on this game. So if you're not sure, just roll. It's better to like lose one interest point than to like miss out on a component. All right, so this game, I picked Center of the Universe on Zoe, and I positioned her in the corner because I was concerned that she'd be more vulnerable in the middle, especially on some of the matchups. But in this fight, her orbs were only hitting like here, so it wasn't hitting this whole front line. And I was on 1 life. I ended up losing by like Zoe was about to cast here, and I ended up losing this fight like just barely. And this 100% was due to positioning because the orbs were only hitting these 2 units. Whereas if she was in the middle, the orbs would have been dealing consistent damage to this entire front line, which meant I would have easily cleaned up this fight. So make sure you put Center of the Universe in the middle. Ideally, I would have put Center of the Universe on Nami instead. And then place her in the middle or Cass. But at the point of the game where the anomaly selection was occurring, I was actually carrying Nami and I was really close to Nami 3. So I actually thought I was going to be primary carrying Nami and then secondary carrying Zoe. So that's why I put it on her. And Zoe you usually want towards the middle anyway if you have another carry that can deal backline damage. Like, so let's say LeBlanc was in the corner ideally and then Zoe here, because Zoe will hit this tank and then go towards the orb or whatever her thing fired out will go towards the farthest 4 hexes away. So I was thinking I would want Zoe in the middle anyway, but because she was my primary carry, and again, I think there was a matchup that would make her more vulnerable in the middle. I put her in the corner, and that was Fight Diff. So just make sure you have Center of the Universe in the middle. And avoid melee carry taking direct damage from enemy mega carry. So here, I knew I was going to play this guy. I, for some reason, decided to put my Echo right here. And Tristana, with her scaling AD, just instantly burst down my Echo where he couldn't really heal back up. What I should have done was just put these 2 over on this side. And this was a trait tracker game, by the way. So that was part of Grea's conditional lines and knowledge checks. So I had a pretty good chance of winning out this lobby, but and this fight ended up being, I think, reasonably close. But because my Echo just instantly died, like I lost this fight. Like basically 5 seconds into the battle, the fight was over. Family Emblem on Rumble is just extremely broken as well, just an FYI. Because it decreases his mana cost, so he's like casting a ton. All right, so that's my match history learnings. Meta mindset of the day. And again, if you want to jump to Grea's talk, please check out the timestamp in the description below. So today's meta mindset of the day is optimism and some ideas related to that. David Rock, in his book Coaching with the Brain in Mind, said, "Learned optimism suggests retaining faith that we will prevail in the end, regardless of the difficulties, but being ready to deal realistically with those difficulties." So right now I'm trying to qualify for, the Tacticians Cup 2. And I've found that like in previous sets, I would usually get to Challenger, and I've gotten to like 1,000 LP plus usually around 2/3 of the way into a set. Just because I can't, I feel like I focus much more on exploration over exploitation in most of my games, and then I don't play as many games as a lot of the top players, so it just takes me longer to get to like a higher LP. And then I was on vacation in December for Christmas break as well with my family, so it's been challenging for me to like just have enough time to play games and study to make snapshots. But I'm gonna try with this Tactician's Cup 2. I'm currently at around 650 LP, so we'll see if I can get there. But the key idea here is to have optimism and have faith and belief that you can get to whatever target you're trying to reach, and still being realistic with the challenges that come along. Because if you have optimism without a fair share of reality, then you're just completely at odds. Like you're probably gonna run into a wall with what reality has for you. But still, kind of having faith matters, because Henry Ford adds, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. Gandhi said, your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny. So it really starts with that optimism, that faith, the belief, the thoughts, and thinking you can. Whether you hold that optimism from the start severely impacts the outcome of what happens to you in your life. Whether that's in TFT, hitting some goal that you have, or whether that's in life, whether you want to switch careers, whether you want to change your lifestyle habits, start exercising more, socialize more, whatever it is, right? You have to have optimism in the face of uncertainty and risk, and still being realistic with hardships that come your way, and specifically maintaining optimism even when things don't go your way, which is inevitable, right? And that's also what I love about TFT, and the probabilistic nature of TFT is that you are constantly challenged with low rolls. If you play enough games, you are almost certainly going to come across low rolls. And maintaining your faith and optimism despite the realistic challenges that come your way and holding the line, that's how you end up completely changing the trajectory of your life. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi said, people who learn to control inner experience will be able to determine the quality of their lives. So much of this is basically saying the mental aspect, the meta mindset, all of your mental edge will convert into reality, physical world edge. And so the more that you can train your mind to maintain this level of optimism, belief that you can do something, it increases the odds that you actually will be able to do what you want to do. So that's your meta mindset of the day. I'm going to dive into the Grea video now. I hope you enjoyed this video so far. I hope you enjoy Grea's discussion. If you have any comments, questions, please let me know in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy Grea's talk.
You might have heard people throw around the word conditional, like conditional comps, conditional lines. Honestly, there's no precise definition for it, and I don't have one either. So you'll just kind of have to see as we go along, but it should be kind of self-evident. You probably won't see anything like completely crazy. In fact, I would not be surprised if you're already somewhat familiar with everything I talk about. As far as what I had in mind, I was making this kind of teaching session. I was more thinking about what do I consider to be strong enough that, let's say, I sit down and play a tournament right now, what lines do I think I'd be willing to actually play? So it's not about like some secret, never sort of seen comp. It's about what do I think is like actually practical. And as far as that goes, obviously it's just my own opinion. You might find some players who disagree with some of these ideas. Like they might think something that I think is really strong to not be that great. They might think something that I think is underwhelming to actually be good, that's fine. Obviously, everything is going to be kind of based on the current patch. That's kind of just a feature of TFT that you can't really do anything about. Stuff changes. Something that's really good right now might not be too amazing in the future. Just how it is. The most recent balance patch was actually not too big, so maybe they'll stay the course with that to some extent and not make any huge changes that shake up too much of what I'm going to talk about. And I think that's all I have as far as like intro. Like I don't want to blab too much, so I'm just going to get into it. I'll share my screen real quick. And I think I'll just start by talking about augments. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is what I consider to be really important, actually, trait tracker. I would consider this to be probably one of the absolute strongest augments in the game right now. It's only offered on 3.2, so it's a bit different than kind of the 2.1. This is your alternate direction. This is what you're playing, but still. So I would basically only play this in vertical scrap. You're probably at least familiar with that comp, and I would consider this to be so strong that I'm willing to just, if I see this on 3.2, more or less abandon my previous game plan and just play scrap. Obviously, there's some exceptions. Like for example, if you're playing some reroll comp, you already spent your money, you might not be able to do that. But in general, this is just a completely broken line, to be honest. So for those who don't know, I guess I might as well just go over it. The reason this is so strong is because every emblem counts as 2 components, including uncraftables. So with 6 scrap, you get 50 shield on every scrap unit for each component you have. Trait Tracker gives 6 emblems. That's 12 components. That's 600 shield on every scrap unit. And that's not counting any use you might get out of the actual emblems themselves. Just purely by having emblems, that's 600 shield on every scrap unit. So that's really powerful. So what I mostly want to talk about is how to actually cash this out, because this is probably the most difficult augment in the game to play. I see players who are considered to be very good just completely flub the execution. I'm not perfect myself either. It's just really difficult to play. So Trait Tracker requires you to have 8 activated non-unique traits for a player combat. The player combat does matter. You can't cash this out on wolves, for example. It's technically possible to cash out on 7, but realistically, you won't be doing that. If you natural the units, you can do that, great. But generally, you're just looking to cash this out on level 8. And the main way to do so is to play around these 2 units, Gangplank and Swain. Both of these are 3 trait units. You already get Form Swapper together, and all their other traits are all 2 traits. So it's very easy to build a board around these 2 units, or to cash out the Trait Tracker. And the other notable units are the Emissary units. Because Emissary actually does count as a non-unique trait. Specifically 1 or 4 Emissary, you probably won't be playing 4. So by playing around these Emissary units, together with GP Swing, you often can cash this out easily. And let me just do a quick example. So let's just say you have let's say you found a GP, you're playing some average mid-game board. You're looking to play scrap, having a Trundle and GP, probably not too crazy. Let's say, I don't know, some let's say you have Pit Fighter. Let's just make a whatever level 6 board. Yeah, whatever. Let's throw in a Conquer unit. So let's say you hit Trait Tracker on 3.2. You're just playing some kind of whatever board. As I said before, this is a really difficult augment to execute. So what you really need to be doing is, in stage 3, you need to kind of plan ahead to try to figure out how you plan to cash this out. So yeah, we're in stage 3. We have some random board. You can also use the team planner in game. You can kind of take your current board, tinker around to see what you need in order to kind of make this happen. As I said before, you're generally looking to cash this out on level 8. And so in this example, we want to play around GP Swing because that generally makes cashing out really easier. So we can kind of plan ahead, see, okay, what kind of board can we cash out? So let's say we're going to probably hit 1 copy of Swain on some kind of level 8 roll down. So even if we don't have them necessarily, we can kind of plan ahead for that. Maddie is probably not too useful. And from here, there's a couple of directions you can go, and you don't need to hard commit yourself into, say, one exact board. I think I actually see some people do that sometimes, and then if you don't hit like one of the exact units for that board, then they can kind of struggle. What you want to do is kind of trying to look at the different options you have. So, for example, as I said before, emissaries are really useful for cashing out Trade Tracker. So one thing you can think about is kind of, okay, so I have 1 out 2 Sorcerer. If I put a Nami on board, that makes things really easy. And then you see a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then from there, you have a lot of flexibility. Any Enforcer unit, any Sentinel unit, or any Visionary unit would work. We can kind of change the board around a little. Let's say we don't have Draven. Instead, we want to play like a Darius. And then we could also do like Garen together with that. Or that probably doesn't work, sorry. I was thinking something like Urgot Trist. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is another 7-unit board with 7 traits, so it's kind of easy. Like any Enforcer unit, any Sentinel unit, any Sorcerer unit, any Visionary unit, all of them are 2 traits. You can just put in whatever. So obviously, you still do have to kind of hold the units that you're trying to play. Like you see Corki and Echo on your roll down, you still have to buy those. But one thing I see people do is they try too hard to make a real board, so to speak. Like they'll be rolling down without having proc their trait tracker yet, and then they see Corki and Echo, they just throw them onto the board, and then they're playing some like 4 scrap whatever, and it's really hard to catch up when you're doing that. So you definitely need to hold your key units, but you also need to actually focus on activating the trait tracker. You accept that your board is going to be really bad for 1 turn, you're going to lose, that's okay. You really just need to practice as soon as possible on your initial roll down. And again, there's like a bunch of possible variations. I'm not going to go through them all. The key thing is to kind of think of what units make it easier for you to proc the trait tracker. And mainly that's going to be Gangplank, Dwayne, and the emissaries. And I mean, I said it before, but I'll say it again. You really don't want to limit yourself to, oh, I want this exact 8-unit board to cash out, because then if you just happen to miss one of the units, everything kind of falls apart. And then after you proc your trait tracker, you just play standard 6 scrap, nice and easy. All right, so the next augment I want to talk about is too much value. Does this exist? What? Oh, too much value. Okay. So this is probably one of the strongest augments in the game right now. What it does is it gives you 4 random 2 costs, and then every player combat for every two unique 2 costs you fielded, you get a free roll. So we can kind of compare this to Raining Gold in a sense, just to like get a feel. Raining Gold gives you 8 gold when taken at 2-1, and then 1 gold every turn. So it's not a perfect comparison, but you can think of a roll as 2 gold because they are. So if you play 4 unique 2 costs, this augment will give you 2 rolls, which is kind of like 4 gold a turn. And 4 2 costs, that's also 8 gold. So it's kind of like Raining Gold, but you're getting 4 gold every turn. Again, it's not a perfect comparison. The gold obviously can only be used to roll, doesn't help you make econ rolls, but just kind of doing some knack and math, you can see that this is like a really, really overpowered version of Raining Gold. The one caveat is you do need to play 4 unique 2 costs, so that's going to overwhelmingly lean you into some kind of 2 cost reroll probably, which also allows you to actually get value out of the rolls, because if you're just sitting there doing nothing, pressing the F key, trying to go like level A or whatever, the rolls aren't really giving you value. So there's a few comps you can play with this. I think the strongest is just Sentinel Tristana. Here's your 4 2 costs, and then typically you would just play 2 more Sentinels, like Loris, Singed, Aurelia all work. Too many rels. Allow if you find her, just very simple level 6 board, 4 Sentinel, 2 Artillerist. And you notably don't have to keep all these units the whole time. For example, if you don't 3-star the Urgot, and 3-starring Urgot is not a priority, you can drop him later. But you obviously would want to keep him for, say, at least stage 3 to get the extra rolls. As far as itemization on this comp goes, pretty simple. This is IE, Ginsu, and Gunblade. The IE is probably the most replaceable. You can use another damage item, like say Deathblade or GS. They're probably somewhat worse, but that's okay. Frontline items, you mainly would just be looking for utility, so Redemption, Sunfire, and even Shroud. And then any other like generic tank items after that works, Bramble, Declaw, Steadfast, whatever. But these would be the highest prio tank items. Obviously, you can also go Last Whisper on your like secondary artillerist instead of Even Shroud. Red buff instead of Sunfire also works out. It's just that you don't particularly want those items on Triss. You can have them on her mid game, for example, but having the frontline utility items generally will give you a better mix of frontline and backline items. And cap for this board is you just keep adding more Sentinel. Level 8, you'll have 6 Sentinel. It's stronger than 4 Artillerist. If you can hit a Corki 2, that's the best like duo carry you can have in the comp. But hitting Corki 2 is kind of difficult. But sometimes you just like hit a bunch of Corkis on level 6. And then so you're generally just playing 2 Artillerists and then 4 to 6 Sentinels. So on the odd levels, which is level 7 and then level 9 if you make it there, you kind of have a flex slot. You can just play like any good unit. Like the 6 costs are great if you hit them, but not too much going on there. And so that's Sentinel Tristana. Very quick overview. The other major comp I would play with this is Sentinel Quick Striker. So you've probably also seen this comp before. Something like a common level 6 board would be something like this. And then so because you're playing too much value, you actually force to play Leona here, which is like fine. If you hit Mbessa, that's ideal for quick. You oftentimes won't hit Mbessa immediately, so you kind of have a filler unit. That's okay. If you don't have a TF, you can actually play some kind of like jank like 6 2 cost to get squeeze out some extra rolls, like whatever. But generally you don't want to do that because with these types of comps, you actually do care about winning rounds in stage 3. Saving HP is often going to be more valuable than just squeezing out like an extra roll around in stage 3, especially because you're often going to not be too strong in stage 2. And as far as itemization of this comp goes, it's very flexible because sorry, 1 second. All right, the itemization is very flexible. You can play basically any combination of the Quick Striker carries. So you can do Nocturne Akali duo, Akali TF duo, Nocturne TF duo. In an ideal world, you have a lot of items and you 3-star all of them and you carry all of them, but that often is not going to happen. And your cap for this comp is you just add more Sentinels. Like level 8 typical board is just Aurelia Alawi for Rebel. You do also kind of want to fit Loris, he's Enforcer. But if you hit Leona 3, which you sometimes will, sometimes won't, then you'll keep her and you would just drop one of these other units. If you don't hit Leona 3, you're happy to just drop her for your cap. Get these other synergies in to buff your actual Quick Strikers. As far as itemization goes, TF mostly just wants raw AP, so like Death Cap is his best item. Shojin's like okay, not the best, not the worst. Utility like Shiv, Morello, or Red Buff is like pretty good on him. And then like Damage Amp, for example, Giant Slayer, Guardbreaker is good. Nocturne, if you don't have a ranged item, he's basically just like your typical melee carry. BT Titans type items are good. QSS is really good on him. Damage items like Deathblade, GS are fine as well. Akali is kind of like a weird hybrid AP bruiser. So you can also go like BT Titans type items on her. You can also go like full AP items like Rabadon's. Crown Guard's not bad. Full damage or damage amp items such as GS Guardbreaker, again, good. And then you also have you often also have a 3-star frontliner. You can go for Rel, Loris, Leona, whatever you hit a lot of copies of. So tank items are fine as well. Again, utility items like Sunfire, Redemption, Even Shroud, Spark are often very good. And while those are the 2 best comps I would say exist in the game for too much value, is there a clear button? I don't know, whatever. I'll just take this stuff off. There's some other comps you can play. Zeri variations come to mind. It's a bit awkward with Zeri because there's no other 2-cost sniper. So typically, if you're playing Zeri, you could either play the 2 Sentinels or the 2 Watchers. And in order to have an actual strong board, you probably want to have the 4 trait of your front line. So for example, either a 4 Sentinel or for a Watcher, and then you need to play another 2-cost though. And again, there's no Sniper, so you just cut Sniper. You have like a random Tristana, something like that. It's not the best thing ever, but it's definitely a viable line. Again, this augment is just really powerful, and any like reasonable reroll line you can get that can actually have the 2 costs and give you these extra rolls is strong. And then you can also just play Renata. So your typical level 6 board would be 4 vision, and then you have kind of the same problem as Zeri, where you have 3 2 costs that you're kind of happy to be playing. You have the Sentinels and the Visionaries, and then you just play like a Ren for stun or whatever. It's like some extra attack speed. It's not the best, but if your items and unit situation, like you natural a lot of Renatas, your items are good for it, it's definitely another angle you can play with the augment. Next, I want to talk a bit more about Zeri, because I consider this to be a fairly weak comp on average, but there are some conditions that can make the comp really strong. One that you may know of is Anger Issues. Anger Issues Zeri is very strong. If you're in a situation where, for example, you're just like carrying a Zeri with items stage 2, then 3-2 hit Anger Issues, that's a potential situation where you could play Zeri. As far as Zeri goes, with Anger Issues, you obviously itemize the Zeri first. You have your 4 Watchers, whoever they may be, Kog'Maw, roll on 6. And then the next unit to itemize would be Scar. You can actually make use of the Ginsu's kind of. He's certainly your main tank in this scenario. There's actually some other augments I want to talk about. No Scout, No Pivot is actually one that you may or may not have seen. I believe this augment is completely obscenely strong with Zeri, given the right conditions. Generally, you want to have like some kind of Sentinel opener. Sentinel Zeri is like particularly strong with this augment. So if you have like Singe, some combination of Singe Relia, it would be really nice if you had the Zeri as well. But you have some combination of early Sentinels to scale them. This combo actually can cap really, really high. It's exceptionally strong. In fact, I've seen people win with this combination without even hitting Zeri 3. As far as Zeri itemization goes, it's actually just like Tristana. Ginsu, Gunblade, IE. You're basically playing a solo carry comp. So this unit is all of your damage. You want to ramp up with Ginsu. Gunblade is very efficient because Sentinels have armor and MR, and Gunblade is essentially giving them more flat health, and then damage item, IE is preferred. It actually is kind of awkward playing this comp. I've played it before myself. You actually do want to roll on 5 because Singed 3 is very high prio. So you're often just playing this like very awkward either 3 Sentinel plus Zeri or 4 Sentinel plus like no Sniper. There's another random Sentinel, Loris. But again, the Singe 3 actually like really makes a huge difference because his attack speed steroid just busts your Zeri so much, and you're basically playing a Zeri solo carry comp. That's not entirely true actually. If you have a Maddie who scales up and you hit Maddie 3, you can actually have a very reasonable dual carry Maddie later in the game. And as far as cap goes for this comp, you may have seen this before, you just keep adding Sentinels. So, what am I missing? Leona maybe? 6 Sentinel on 8. And a couple of other augments that you're probably already familiar with. I mean, Starry Night is just a very strong reroll augment. You really would prefer to reroll either 1 and or 2 costs. So Sentinel Zeri would be a great comp to reroll with this. You probably know about Renata with this, and there's other comps you can play with this. And one perhaps lesser talked about augment is Shop Glitch. This augment is actually incredibly strong for reroll. It's actually buffed to every 2.5 seconds. So 30 divided by 2.5 is 12. So every non-combat round, this gives you 12 free rerolls. Compared to something like Trade Sector, Trade Sector gives you 1 free roll a round, and there's 6 rounds in a stage. So Trade Sector gives you like 6 free rolls a stage. It does give you 4 starting gold as well, but essentially gives you 6 free rerolls a stage, while this gives you 12. The obvious downside is happens at neutrals, so you're kind of like weak for the whole stage. But for any type of like 1-2 house reroll, for example, Zeri, Renata, you can even play Sentinel Tristana. You can play Quick Strikes with this. The augment is actually incredibly strong. Right, going to the next augment. These are kind of grouped together as they're more or less the same augment, but I want to talk about Dumbify and Golemify. So what these do is basically you lose all your champions on your border bench and you get either a dummy or a golem with a percentage of their health and AD. I guess the dummy doesn't have AD because it doesn't attack. And it also scales a bit more HP by stage. So both of these augments are incredibly powerful, except for the overwhelming downside that you basically lose all your money because you're not selling. It doesn't sell your champions. You just lose them. So you're basically down however much gold your board plus bench was. Generally, you would only take these in situations where you have a lot of extra gold. For example, if you have a 2/1 econ augment, for example, if it's a portal such as Gold Sub, Scuttle Puddle, Crab Brave, etc. But in any situation where you can kind of afford to eat the monetary loss, both of these augments are just insanely strong. They can both kind of solo be your frontline, which doesn't necessarily mean you have no frontline, but you can basically play any kind of comp, like say, sorcerers, Twitch, Silco, whatever, and you'll just have like so much extra frontline. He's so much stronger in the long run. And another notable combination is with these is Built Different. Built Different gives all your units more health if you have no traits active. So your dummy or golem will have a bunch of extra health because you'll be playing a bunch of units with extra health on your board, and then the dummy and the golem themselves also gain the Built Different bonus, which is a bit of extra HP is not the biggest deal, but in the case of the golem specifically, it actually has a lot of AD. So Built Different gives it more attack speed, and it actually does a lot of damage. And you generally just have a near unbeatable mid game, and it also scale fairly well into late game with it. All right, next augment I want to talk about is Rig Shop. Specifically Rig Shop Plus, because I think the 2/1 version is very weak. There's just some fundamental problems with it. It's a bit too early to want to commit to that type of 3-cost reroll, and also it just doesn't really do that much for your stage 2. But if you have the spot for it, this can be very strong stage on 3/2. It also gives you a bunch of rolls. I think 9 rerolls, which is only 2 rerolls short of rolling for days, which gives 11 on 3/2. So there's a lot of power behind this augment if you can leverage the effect to play 3-cost reroll. The main comp to look for would be Emissary Sork and or Vertical Sork. In any case, Sway Nami of the 3-cost you're generally looking to play for. So you can either play a 6 Sork version. This version is arguably a bit lacking in frontline. You probably would generally roll on level 7, so there's 1+1, like Darius would often be thing, or at least if you find her, and then the other version is just 4 Emissary. It's obviously requires you to find both Garen and Mbessa, and then you have any random Sork here for 4 Sork on 7. But the benefit of this version is that you can actually just play backline Swain, which is in general a stronger unit than frontline Swain, because in this case Garen can actually be your tank, whereas with the 6 Sork version, your frontline just kind of doesn't exist and has to be Swain. Again, the difficulty is you need all the emissaries, including the 4 costs, which you're often not guaranteed to find. Itemization for this comp, it's kind of flexible. If you're playing Swain carry, Swain's base is Shojin, Guardbreaker, and Jeweled Gauntlet. Attack speed, like Nashers on him, is not that optimal. You really just want to have the 1 mana item and then full damage. Stuff like Giant Slayer and Rabdon is also an acceptable setup or substitute. Nami items are a bit more flexible. Stuff like the Nashers is better on her. You can go something like Shojin, Nasher JG, and then frontline is whatever generic items. And I think that covers all about this comp. All right, next one. Next is we're actually kind of staying sorcerers. Next is I want to talk about Moonlight, and I suppose Greater Moonlight also works. So what these do, if you're not familiar, combat start, one random, one cost champion is upgraded to 3-star and gains 3580 in AP, and the prismatic version upgrades to 4-star and it gives less than AP. So the unit I want to talk about specifically with this is the Zyra. You might often find yourself playing some kind of just generic Sork board in the early mid game. Something like this maybe. Yeah, let's just say you found a Zoe on 6 Sork, whatever. These are only offered on 4-2. Basically, Zyra 3 and Zyra 4 are just incredibly powerful. In fact, Zyra in general is probably just an overtuned, very powerful unit. So what you can do with these, if you're just playing some kind of Sork board in the mid game, you have whatever backline items, whatever. You find one of these augments on 4-2, you can just then have Zyra as your main carry for the entire game. And then the only thing you would need to find is like any form of frontline. The main advantage of this is your board ends up being really cheap. Like you don't need to hit like a Zoe 2 or anything like that. Your main carry is just already established, and generally, you would want to try to push 9 with this type of strategy to cap around, Elise, LeBlanc, 6 cost are great. Hit whatever. It's just the normal sorcerer board, but Zyra carry with these augments is particularly strong, or I guess I should say Zyra 3 and 4 are particularly strong. These augments just let you have that even when you're playing a normal game. All right.
They're like tailored for items. Like if you have Lux on your board, can it hit Lux?
I don't think so. I think you just have to not play the Lux. No, I'm certain it's not. I'm certain it's not. Yeah, you cannot. That's a really good point. You cannot play any other 1 cost, so the Lux would absolutely have to go, and that would probably mean you don't have 6 sorcerer. That's fine. You would generally just be happy to play the or emissary board, or you can just play whatever like random other frontline you can cobble together. But yeah, that's really important. That's a good catch. All right. Next is Unleash the Beast. You guys are probably all already familiar with this, so I'll just go over this as quickly as possible. This augment is probably actually put the icon here. Very good with Urgot. You just want to stack as many Sterix as possible. You want Pit Fighter, Artillerist, Re-Experiment. You roll on 6. There's generally a flex slot, at least if you hit her. If not, Trundle generally works fine. But honestly, like random other bruiser or whatever works fine. The only important things I would say are you must have Zyra on the experiment hex at all times. The Zyra experiment bonus is what this makes this comp actually work. Urgot needs it. Doesn't matter if you hit Warwick, Experiment, Emblem, or whatever. Urgot and Zyra must be 2 of the units on your hexes, and you generally want to always take an Urgot anomaly with this comp because he is basically your entire board. And yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on that. That's probably something that everyone's already seen. All right, next. Exalted Adventure. You may be familiar with this already. You gain 3 2-cost champions. If you 3-star 2 of them, you get a bunch of loot. Get a lesser champion to play our next 3 stages. Obviously, there's no specific comp with this, as it just depends on what you hit. But one thing I do want to say is it's fine to basically have only 1 unit that you actually care about in your comp. You shouldn't try to force like some kind of weird comp. Like let's say you get I don't know, let's pick some random like Renata, Set, Vlad. There's no real comp that uses there's no reroll comp that uses the 3 of these together. So with a setup like this, I'd probably just look to reroll Renata, and you can 3-star either of the other 2 units and just sell it, and the augment is still just very powerful. And that's honestly just the main point I want to make with this augment. That you should just play a good comp because you should get at least 1 2 cost that you can just play a comp around, and you shouldn't force yourself to like add in some extra garbage. Okay. Oh, and then finally, investment strategy. I guess both versions will do. So I would say this is kind of a risky augment. What this does is, what it actually does is your champions gain permanent max health for every interest you are in. And what this actually does, though, is it makes you play a very risky game in which you're constantly greeting intervals in order to scale. In general, I would recommend that you only take this in extra gold openers, so either like 1 or 2 component openers, which give you extra gold, or again, the econ portals such as Gold Sub, Scuttle Puddle, etc. And I would also recommend you only take it if the units you're actually looking to scale are you already have them. So a common comp to play with this would be Renata reroll. So if you have like Singed, Aurelia, whatever Sentinels you want to scale early. I guess Aurelia isn't really one of them because she's not important. You can also play either Zeri plus Sentinels, Zeri plus Watchers, Tristana plus Sentinels. But the main point is you're generally going to be a bit too slow in tempo and scaling in a normal game, and you really do want that extra gold from whether it's portals or, well, it's portals or gold openers in order to build this scale up to 50 or 70 in the case of Prismatic as quickly as possible. And then once you get to that point of maximum interest, that's when you can actually start spending your gold to get stronger. And again, with this type of reroll comp, either saving HP or winning rounds in stage 3 is generally quite important. With this augment in particular, you're almost guaranteed to lose stage 2 rounds. So your tempo is just a bit too far behind with a normal amount of econ. Right? And I think that's all the non-hero augments I wanted to talk about. I think I'll just quickly go over the hero augments. Combat Medic Stab Hero Augment. You can play this with either Bruisers or Enforcers. Comp-wise, it's very simple. You just take the vertical trait, put all the units on your board. So here are the Bruisers, and here are some Enforcers, I guess. Itemization. In the case of Bruisers, you really want Archangel. In every case, you really want JG, and then for Bruisers, you want a healing item, preferably BT. Hodge is also fine. Can I get another stab? I can. Archangel is not as good in the case of Vertical Enforcer. You want more just like upfront burst, so something like either JG, Hodge, BT, like JG, Hodge, Titans, or some combination of those items. JG is generally just as most important item though. If you can get I get emblems. If you can get an Enforcer emblem on whoever, I would say the Enforcer version is stronger. So let's say you get like 3-2 Enforcer emblem. I would always just play the Enforcer version then. But otherwise, I would say the comps are actually pretty comparable, and it just kind of depends on how your item in your game develops. And I think that's all I had to talk about for stat.
Wait, for these hero augment comps, can you talk about like how for each one, like how strong you think they are? Like, what would you need to commit to this comp?
Very unclear. So
Yeah,
I
no
guess
one
I can
knows.
kind of skip ahead and say I think the Singed and Aurelia hero augments are really bad, and I would not play them. Like obviously, if I had like I don't know 8 copies, I just load in with a 3-star, I would. But in any realistic scenario, I consider these to be bad and will not play them. So as far as like something like Steb goes, I would say like if I can have like 2-star on when I'm picking the augment. So like if I have 2 steps already, the augment gives you 1. That gives a 2-star with like good items. I would take it. If I had like like maybe 4 or 5 steps with bad items, that would also be okay. But as for the bad ones, I would not take them in any realistic scenario. Like the ones I'm going over are what I consider to be the good ones. Oh, next is trolling. I guess I shouldn't have taken the bruises out because yeah, this is again a very simple comp. You have Trundle and then you put all the bruisers in. Yeah, 6 bruiser. Itemization for him is also very simple. His bis is either BT Hodge Titans or BT double Titans. You can obviously have other items on him, for example, mid-game, stage 2, stage 3, try to streak, just slam whatever you have, but these are the actual good builds on him. Not counting stuff like artifacts stuff, there's actually a lot of really strong artifacts on him. But as far as craftable items go, these are the good ones. Stuff like Sterax or QSS that you might think is good, it's not good. You want one of these builds. The comp is actually very flexible beyond the bruisers. If you can hit like Corki, something like this, Corki Tristana backline is really good with Corki as the duo carry. You can do something like Twitch plus any experiment unit. Twitch, if you are lucky enough to hit Jace is a fantastic backline carry, even Jace 1. And you can just add like various legendaries and good units. And Bess is a nice unit to have because her emissary bonus gives armor and MR, which is very efficient with bruisers who just have a lot of HP. But again, the comp is very flexible beyond put bruisers on your board. GP is often who you have as a kind of like mid-game carry, because you can't just skip straight to the 4 and 5 cost when you're playing a 1 cost reroll. But you would often not want to have him on your final board unless you manifest GP3 out of nowhere. But yeah, really simple comp. I don't think there's too much to dwell on with that. Next is Crimson Pact, Vladimir Hero Augment. This one is a bit complicated. I guess first I'll just talk about the itemization. This is Archangel, Gunblade, and I personally like Nashers over Ginsu. You probably see everyone and their mother built Ginsus on this. There's a couple of problems with Ginsu. One is that a lot of fights are just really short, so Ginsu is obviously a really good item when you have a lot of time to ramp up, you have long fights. You have Archangel and Gunblade, so Ginsu can kind of play for that scaling 1v9 their whole board fantasy, but I think on average Nash is a strong item. But the main thing is you already have 2 rod items, Archangel, Gunblade, so if you want another rod item in Ginsu, it's just not our nightmare. Nashers makes your item economy so much better, unless you just happen to nash a lot of rods. But the actual weird thing about this comp is the mid game is actually really weird. So generally you want to play like something like 4 Watcher, and then Sork, something like Nami, and it's a 2-cost reroll, so you do want to actually roll on level 6, but you'll notice like board is just awkward. There's no like obvious +1 to play with this. You can't get to 4 Sork or anything without dropping 4 Watcher. There's just like nothing to really play. What I do want to talk about is the actual end board for this, which is the strongest end board for this is almost certainly 4 Emissary. So it's something like 4 Emissary. You want to play Elise, and then in an ideal world, you would hit LeBlanc, and then you would have like maybe 4 Sork with Swin or something. You often don't live in an ideal world though. You might have some like scuffed 4 Watchers set up. Because you are rerolling for Vlad on level 6, you might hit something like Vander 3 randomly, in which case 4 Watchers not even that bad. But you do want to play around 4 Emissary later in the game, which is weird because you probably won't hit them on level 6 when you're actually rerolling. And another random aside, one of the best augments for this comp is Anger Shoes. If you are playing Crimson Pact and you see Anger Shoes, that is an insta-take. So I'm exceptionally strong on him. And
would you take this one with like good items but 0 Vladimir?
Generally no. It varies a bit, but one of the big problems with this augment is the unit is sometimes heavily contested. I think lately sorcerers have been getting pretty popular, so there's usually like some people just holding Vladimir. While I think the augment is inherently actually quite strong, people holding Vladimir is actually a really big concern.
What's your thought on using this to fast 9 and not rerolling Vlad?
In theory, it's really, so you would never want to plan to do that, but you could definitely be in a scenario where you look around and say, okay, I can't realistically hit Vlad 3, so this is the only option I really have, and you would just do it. But that should never be your plan on 2-1 when you're taking the augment. That makes sense. I think there's one more to go. Gloves off. This is the Vander hero augment. This is probably something like IE BT Hodge. This actually plays kind of similar to Family, which is a comp most people are probably familiar with, except instead of Family, where you have Violet as your primary carry and just add pit fighters, you kind of just add Watchers. So you kind of have the normal Family shell, and you just you would just keep adding Watchers as you level up. 6 Watcher is your eventual cap. We good? Okay, I think we're good. As far as itemization goes, I guess I should talk about that a little more. IE is really important on him, unless you have something like Piercing Lotus that makes him able to crit. His spell doesn't crit naturally, so having the ability to crit basically gives him like a multiplier. And the way this comp actually plays out, if you've ever seen it, basically you're just looking to like one shot with each cast and kind of full heal and go 1v9. So that's also why you play Watcher, because you just want to buff the Vander as much as possible, give him as much durability as possible, so you can just survive one shot, so on and so forth. And I mean, I should probably say this earlier, but as with most hero augments, you're pretty much locked into taking an anomaly for your actual hero augment. It's more or less the only unit on your board that matters. I would even skip stuff like Dramatic Entrance, Infectious Anomaly, very like strong utility or team-wide anomalies, because you really just care about buffing up your hero augment. But pretty simple comp. Reroll on 6 because Vander's who you care about. Add Watchers. You can add stuff like, I don't know, a random Echo. Yay, synergies. But very simple comp. And I believe that's all the hero augments I want to talk about. As I said before, I think Aurelia and Singed, Blade Dance, Mad Chemist are just not good right now. And if they ever become good, then, well, that's that. But all right, so I think that's all I want to talk about with regard to augments. I'm going to talk about foreign artifacts now. So first, a little general thing. How do I evaluate these things and look for good users? So if you just go to Tactics.tools, Items tab, Artifacts, you can just like click on any one of these artifacts and you'll see a bunch of numbers. So there's 2 numbers here, delta and relative delta. So delta is how does this unit with this item perform compared to every other unit with this item. So for example, the delta of Infinity Force Warwick is Infinity Force Warwick versus Infinity Force on everyone else. And this is not very useful because, as you can see, if you just go to whatever item, you see a bunch of 6 costs and a bunch of 5 costs. That's because if you have the item on the 6 or 5 cost, that means you actually have the unit, which already way skews your placement. So what I'm interested in is relative delta. This is how does this unit with this item do compared to this unit without this item. So Infinity Force Mordekaiser is Infinity Force Mordekaiser. Every game with Infinity Force Mordekaiser compared to every Mordekaiser game without Infinity Force. And this will generally give you a better idea of how good the item, and this is not just for artifacts, same goes for regular items as well. This generally gives you an idea of how good an item actually is on the unit. But I want to, which item was it that I looked at earlier? There's one important thing I want you to be careful of, which is sometimes you're gonna like look at this and see some very suspicious numbers, like Silvermere Dawn Draven minus 1.78. That is just obviously not right. So you do see that for stuff like this, the play rate is often very low. And the reason for this is actually very simple. It's, if I go to tables, it's Conqueror and Family. So Conqueror has Artifact Anvil at 650 and another one at 1200. And then Family has Family has Fish Bones. I think it doesn't have a general artifact, but the reason you see these random Conqueror units at the top is because the only time they would have this artifact is if you have a really good Conqueror spot and you're like out of item slots to give this artifact to, so you just randomly throw them on. So be wary of really low play rates and like really extreme numbers, because it means something might be really wrong. And with that being said, I'll go over the artifacts that I think are relevant, which is not going to be all of them, but We'll just go down the list. So Gold Collector, this is a pretty strong generic, not too much to say. Gamblers, fairly generic, not too much to say. Anima Visage is generic. Sniper's Focus is Range Nocturne. You might be familiar with it. I guess I can go over it again really quickly. So with someone actually asked a question about this a while ago, and I answered. I think they asked like, what's the like typical Nocturne board? So with Range Nocturne, I did talk about the Quick Strikers earlier. Am I missing RC? Okay. I did talk about the Quick Strikers earlier. There's arguably some deviation here because with Range Nocturne, you're playing an overwhelmingly Nocturne-centric board. You still do want some manner of like duo carry eventually, but and that's typically going to be TF, but it varies. You could also easily have like an Akali 3 with items. So you often won't hit Embes on 6, which means if you play like 2 Sentinel plus these 3 Quick Strikers, you kind of have a flex slot. Because you're playing around Nocturne, you actually don't mind playing like a random Automata unit, a Mumu plus Crank, whatever. But the second you find Embesa, they're just out of there. You play 4 Quick, and then once again you cap around 4 Sentinel. And as far as itemization goes, obviously multiple ranged artifacts are really good on him, but he is no longer a melee carry. You just want full damage. Stuff like IE is good. GS. Can I put more than 3 items on a unit? Probably not. Deathblade. QSS is also very good because there's stuff like Elise, which can still CC you, even if you're not melee, and QSS also gives quite a bit of attack speed. It's a bit underrated as a DPS item. So something like QSS IE is, for example, a really good build. But I don't want to ramble too much on about Range Nocturne because you really know about that. But oh yeah, the main thing is the Sentinel version is played because Automata is just not very strong right now. In particular, Automata forces you to play a lot of very subpar units. So these are the Automata units. Nocturne is Nocturne. We don't talk about him, but Malzahar is actually quite good, but he's a 5 cost. You probably won't have him. So if you're playing like 4 Automata, this is what you're playing. Amumu is basically a target dummy. Kog'Maw is actually just nothing, and then Blitzcrank is actually not bad, but you're basically playing 2 units that do absolutely nothing. So you'd rather play the Sentinels, which actually give you some frontline. And the effect is kind of similar. Automata gives some armor and MR to your Automata units. Sentinels give armor and MR to your whole team, a bit more for the Sentinels, but the unit quality is higher. Alright, next artifact. Infinity Force is pretty generic, not too much to say. Fishbones is, again, Range Nocturne. Manazane is a fairly generic artifact. I will say this item is particularly good on Silco. And it's a bit interesting because I consider Silco to be like a very, very weak comp right now, but I would be very willing to play with Manazane. That doesn't necessarily mean hard force. Again, there's like plenty of other units that are good with Manazane. Like, for example, you could play Backline Swain, Emissary Storks, or something like that. But Manazane would also actually be... Manazane Silco is actually strong enough where I'm willing to play it. And it's just the same old Black Rose Dominator comp you're probably used to. You'll still do want a Shojin on him with the Manazane and then a damage item, some kind of amp, something like JG, Guardbreaker, so on and so forth. But you're probably already familiar with Black Rose Dominator. That's Defiance. So, in my mind, the best user's item is Smeech. And I guess I can talk about Smeech a bit because one thing about Smeech is Smeech is a comp that you can play from Chem Baron Opener when you don't get like a full lose streak. Like, for example, if you get a Shriek Reef, you can just go for this comp. You just play whatever Chem Baron units, and you don't even try to specifically lose. You basically just play your strongest board. You're fine with losing. You're fine with winning. And let me see if I can bring up the tables real quick. So as far as the cash out goes, there's 100 breakpoint, which is really good for Smeech. Lesser Shimmer Dupe, Rennie Smeech. This is basically 2 Smeeches. Amazing. But most of these other lower tier cash outs are really bad for Smeech. You get these weaker versions of these items. The breakpoint you're looking for with Smeech is generally 300. So you have stuff that, like, for example, gives Smeech plus tier 2 item, 2-star Smeech. This is some like reasonable items, Savika. This gives 2 Smeech as well. They're not all amazing, but so the general plan with Smeech is let's say you have some kind of Chem Baron opener with Smeech. You don't get to full streak. Your like item and unit situation makes you want to play Smeech, and then you can just play your strongest board. You'll win some, you'll lose some, and eventually you get to 300 in cash. And just plays. You often will keep some Chem Baron on your board, but you play some kind of like standard ambusher board, stuff like this. And so back to my point about Death Defiance. Again, you absolutely don't have to play Chem Baron with this. You can just play standard like ambusher stuff with Smeech. We roll on 7, everything's good. And Death Defiance, the other good user is just Urgot. I talked about Urgot earlier with Unleash the Beast. It's pretty good. Yeah, okay. Mogul's Mill is generic and honestly not that good. Light Shield Crest is an artifact that is particularly synergy with Sentinels. So the main comp I would look for from this is something like Academy Sentinels. I don't even think this comp is particularly good, but the synergy with Light Shield Crest is just really good. It gives you extra. The shield amount scales with the armor and MR of the holder, and then shield is basically like HP, so it's also more effective if units that are being shielded are Sentinels. You can also play something like Renata Reroll with it. But Renata Reroll is trending a lot more towards like 6 Visionary because it's a really powerful trait. So you often only have, for example, 6 Visionary, 2 Sentinel on 7 or an 8. So it might not be quite as strong. But in any case, Light Shield Crest plus Sentinels is a really strong combo. Right. Zanya's is really strong generic. Hull Crusher is generic. Prowler's Claw, we're back to Smeech. One thing about Prowler's Claw is it just has it's particularly strong stat-wise with ambushers. 40 AD plus 50 crit chance. You might not think it'd be like conceptually too strong with Smeech because he kind of jumps around to their weak units anyway, so the jumping effect is not that valid on him. But he's pretty much the best Prowler's Claw used in the game, just because of like the raw stats it gives. You might be wondering why not play Prowler's Claw Camille instead, and that is actually something I do want to talk about. I guess I'll just talk about now. So one thing is Camille is just not a very strong carry right now. If you're playing Camille 3 solo carry, even with an artifact such as Prowler's Claw, Death Defiance, which I mentioned earlier, I liked on Smeech, is theoretically really good on her, but one, Camille is not too strong. The other really important thing is if you're playing Camille, you're playing 2 cost reroll, you're probably just going to end up rolling on 6. And rolling on 6 versus rolling on 7 for Smeech significantly lowers your odds of hitting Echo. And this is really, really bad in the current environment because Echo is a highly contested unit because of all the scrap players. So if you're playing Camille and you don't hit an Echo on 6, you're leveling a lot later and you're basically rolling for Echo after all the other players are. Whereas if you're playing Smeech, you're 7 on 4-1 at the latest and you can roll a lot of gold to try to find at least one Echo. And Echo is really important as a duo carry because if you're playing against Camille, solo carry is not very good. That doesn't mean Camille 3 herself is terrible, but you need a duo carry. And the duo carry would be either Smeech 3 or Echo, but it's really hard to find an Echo if you're actually playing for Camille solely. For that reason, I highly prefer these items on Smeech. Obviously, you can just have like a Camille holding these items. That can be your like stage 2 and 3, move them later. But I would not play for Camille 3 carry as my endgame comp. I would look for Smeech. Trenchcoat. Trenchcoat is definitely worth mentioning. So this item actually got a change a while ago. I don't remember if it was this patch or a patch ago, but it now procs at 66% health instead of, I believe it was 50% before. You're probably already familiar with Trenchcoat and Bessa. It's still a really good line to take with this artifact. The same emissary board you're probably familiar with. I mean, Swain, GP, Corky. It doesn't have to be exact units, but this is kind of like the most common version of the comp. So back to the change I was talking about, where it now procs at 66%. This was arguably a buff because basically what happens when you have something like Edge of Night, which is the best item to pair with Trenchcoat on these types of units, is that before what happened is your unit would proc Edge of Night, and then the Edge of Night de-aggros, so your unit doesn't actually split immediately. Now the threshold is 66%, so your Edge of Night will not proc before the split. So what happens if you just solo frontline your Mbessa or whatever Trenchcoat unit, it will split immediately. And you want to split immediately because the clones do full damage, so you're in some, as long as the clones don't die, you're basically tripling your damage. And that's kind of what the build is for, because the clones will still proc Edge of Night. So you just want to do as much damage as possible by splitting, and then the itemization is to keep the clones alive. And you don't have to play these units. I would say the main thing is just 4 Emissary is very important if you're playing Mbessa carry. You could even play something like Emissary Sorks. Probably like somewhat familiar with this comp already. So something like, if you have AP items, you can play either Swain or Nami as your backline carry, and just like 4 Sorks. You may or may not find LeBlanc. I mean, probably want Garen. One really important thing about Trenchcoat is that the vast majority of anomalies do not work with it. So basically anything you can think of, it just doesn't work. The one exception that you probably are already familiar with is Ultimate Hero, but basically everything else doesn't work with this, which means when you're playing any kind of Trenchcoat carry line, you basically cannot anomaly your Trenchcoated unit. While we're on the subject of Trenchcoat, I can talk about Family. Family is a comp that I consider to be very weak right now, but there are some conditions that make it viable, and I believe Trenchcoat to be one of them. Probably already familiar with this. You have the Family units, you level and add Pit Fighters as you go. The build is the same. Sterax is just a very efficient item with the Trenchcoat, and then Edge of Night is probably the single best item you can have because the clones can proc it, stop them from just dying, in particular against AoE or whatever. You probably already know how this comp works. You just reroll Violet 3. Other 3 stars are fine as well. And you add Pit Fighters as you go. I believe that's all for Trenchcoat. Middens is a fairly generic artifact. Seekers is fairly generic. Silvermere, you would think this would be really good on Camille, and if you played earlier in the set, it was at one point really good on Camille, but Silvermere's been nerfed, Camille's been nerfed. As I mentioned earlier, there's just some problems with playing Camille reroll. Part of it is just that she's weak. Part of it is that it makes it hard to find Echo. It's really important. So I personally would not like Silvermere. Funny enough, there's one unit that Silvermere is actually really good on, which is it's actually Caitlyn. Her attack speed is so low that the penalty is not that big of a deal, and she makes use of the massive AD that you get. The only problem is she's a 5 cost, so if you just, have an artifact on 2-1, you can't really play for that. On the subject of artifacts, Mordekaiser has like a hilarious amount of artifacts that he's really good with, but again, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to play Mordekaiser. Spectral Cutlass. This is, in theory, really good on Camille. Again, you don't really want to be playing Camille carry. I think the one unit this is actually really good on is Vi. So, one thing you can do is play, for example, Camille early mid-game and tempo into an Enforcer board and play Cutlass Vi. As far as Cutlass goes, Edge of Night it's not mandatory, but it's a really good combo because without it, your unit can often just get focused down and die by their backliners. Fixer's Glass is fairly generic. Wits End Lichbane. We can talk about Kog'Maw. So early in the set, you may remember this Kog'Maw comp. Basically the Zeri comp, but with Kog'Maw carry instead of Zeri. Kog has fallen out of favor quite a bit because he's just honestly not that strong. Lichbane and Wits End are both particularly good artifacts on him, but I would say that you should probably not take either of these artifacts and say, okay, I'm just going to play Kog'Maw. If you already have a Kog'Maw, like you get dropped one from stage 1 in a box, and then on 2-1 you have the option to take one of his best artifacts, then I would absolutely do so. I think it's a really strong tempo play. You might not be guaranteed to win, but you'll be strong for all of stage 2 and 3, and you'll have like a very easy transition into actually playing Kog'Maw. But otherwise, I would be very hesitant to take either of these. And Wits End and Lichbane, I would say, are both basically just Kog'Maw artifacts. They're kind of generic. You could play them elsewhere, but I don't think any of those lines are very strong, to be honest. Blinding Jewel is generic, but honestly not strong. Luden's Tempest, generic, not that strong. Deathfire is generic. Unending Despair, one line that's kind of intriguing with this is like Quick Striker with Loris TF. I would say it's definitely a playable line, but it's a bit dependent on tempo. Similar to what I said about Kog'Maw, where like I would take one of his artifacts if I had the unit. I think I would not be too inclined to take Unending Despair unless I had something like a Loris already. Having a Loris with Unending Despair on stage 2, for example, is actually really strong in high tempo. So even if the end result is not that strong, being able to play that kind of a strong opener and then turn it into a reroll comp is definitely a valid line. And then Horizon Focus is fairly generic, honestly not that strong. There's not that many units that really abuse it in this set. I guess one thing that's worth mentioning is the Anomaly Dramatic Entrance actually does work with Horizon Focus. So yeah, after 6 seconds you get to Horizon Focus their whole board if you have that combination. Yay. Talisman has some like really powerful potential with, for example, Bruisers, but on average it's pretty weak and I would not be too thrilled to take it. I think that's everything I had planned to go over. So if there's any like questions, go ahead. Otherwise, if anyone has any suggestions for like what type of stuff to talk about in the future for events like these, I would love that because honestly, I don't have that many ideas. I'm not very creative. But yeah, questions, concerns, anything, go ahead.
How much time do you spend studying compared to playing? I asked this to Rain the other day too.
How much time do I spend studying? Depends on what you kind of studying. Like, I spend a fair bit of time just like casually watching streams, but I don't consider that studying. If you do, then I mean, yeah, that's just a matter of perspective. As far as like looking at stats and stuff, I don't really like. I don't know. Maybe like once in a while, like once a patch, I'll sit down and like kind of just like browse through these stuff like Ornn artifact stats for like 5 to 10 minutes. But yeah, I don't really do much that. At least when I think of the word studying, I don't think I really do much that would be considered that. But again, that kind of depends on your definition.
Right now, when you play Twitch, are you playing it from like Quinsu with early debt collector, or like what do you look for if you play that comp?
So I really don't like Twitch.
Mhm.
Experiment +1 is the obvious one that I would be willing to play Twitch from. So yeah, Ginsu Gold Collector I think is definitely a strong setup for Twitch, but even then I would be very hesitant to play it. Because one thing is if you have Gold Collector is actually like a fairly flexible item in that you can just play, for example, Corki with Scraps.
Right.
You can play Corki with Academy Sentinel. There's like something I was forgetting. Oh, you can even just play like Ambushers. Like it's not the best thing ever, but 80 plus crit chance. It's a reasonable item in Ambushers. You just throw it on like your Smeech or whoever. Oh, Enforcer was the other big one. I personally think that Enforcer is a fairly strong comp even without an emblem. So I would just be happy to, even if it just like ends up on a Maddie for most of the game because I don't hit Caitlyn, I'd be willing to just play like a tempo collector line into Forcers. But sometimes your spot might be really good for it. Like Ginsu is an item that would definitely lean you more towards Twitch compared to like other lines. It's not too good on units like Corki or Caitlyn. But so if you have like a Ginsu collector win streak line and maybe you natural sum the units, like I don't know, maybe a stage 3 Twitch, I might do it then. But otherwise I would still be leaning towards like either Corki or Enforcers with that type of line. I think Twitch is just very underwhelming.
Yeah, similarly, if you get like the 2-1 pan augment offered that gives like HP
Oh
after
yeah,
a unit's
cooking pot.
called. Yeah, cooking pot, like are you typically just like looking for like ambushers or Sork or
So in my opinion, cooking pot is only good if you can have a unit to actually start feeding immediately. So
Mhm.
in my mind, those would be Urgot. If I have an Urgot, I'd be happy to play just Urgot reroll and just feed the Urgot the whole game. What else was there? There was yeah, Ambusher. You mentioned Ambusher. I think if I open with like a Smeech, I'd be willing to just play that line. I do think like if I just didn't have a Smeech, if I just had like Camille Powder plus whatever, I would not look to play Ambusher's front line. Honestly, I think Cooking Pot is just like kind of mediocre right now. I would be willing to play it from Swain as well. That was the other big one. Sorry. If you can feed a Swain the whole game with Cooking Pot, I think that's actually quite strong. Play Sorcerers, but otherwise, like if you just have like a random, say like Steb or Trundle, and like you're looking to play like Bruiser Twitch, you like feed one of these the whole game. I think that's like pretty mediocre. I wouldn't really look to do that. As I mentioned, with like ambushers, I would want it to specifically be Smeech. I don't think feeding a Camille or a Powder is like that high value. Yeah, so to summarize, I would only take Cooking Pot if I think there's like a high value unit I can actually feed. And you can argue that Nunu or Rennie do count as high value units into Bruiser Twitch. But I would only look for that if I actually had like good components for that as well. That makes sense. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that did. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I don't want to take too many questions, but if no one else is gonna ask one, can I just ask, are you just like hard angling scrap when you like miss one of these conditionals?
I think the two to some extent, yes. I think the other really strong comp right now to kind of default is just Sorcerer. So
Mhm.
one thing is Zyra is like one of the strongest one costs in the game. Or I don't know if that's the right way to express it. Zyra is one of the strongest early units in the game. So having a Zyra 2 with items plus like whatever random frontline is, and maybe like some Sork units is really strong. So if you have a Zyra 2 with reasonable frontline opener and some reasonable item slams, just like AP items or even something generic like Guard Breaker, like Red Buff or whatever, I'd be really happy to slam those kind of items and play for a win streak. And oftentimes your items are going to end up in a way where scrap is not too appealing, and you'll also probably be like holding a bunch of the Sork units and playing them on your board. So in that case, I would just be happy to play like some kind of 6 sorcerer line. Emissary Sork is also an option. The only thing about Emissary Sork is you can't really fit 6 sorcerer, and 6 sorcerer is just a really strong trait right now. But as far as that goes, yeah, I think the two main default lines I think about are sorcerers and scrap. And in my mind, sorcerers is more of like a win streak tempo kind of line. You could play from loose streak and get away with it certainly, but scrap is kind of the loose streak line in my mind. And yeah, as far as the other default lines go, I'm not a fan of Academy Sentinels. I think it's a playable line. It's not a great one. Not a fan of Twitch. Not a fan of Sickle. Oh, Enforcers. Enforcers is that other one. I think like Sorcerers, you kind of do really want to win streak with this line, but I think even without Emblem, Vertical Enforcer, just 6 Enforcer is a really strong line. So it's kind of like the itemization is kind of weird. You could, for example, play this line from some kind of like say backline items, like I don't know, IE Maddie or something. You could play it from some kind of like melee carry items like BT whatever, BT times whatever, future Vi items. And you could even play it from some kind of like AP items around TF. But yeah, those are the 3 lines I would say I'm like happy to default: Sorcerer, Scrap, Enforcer. or at least as far as level 8 boards go. I would argue some. Again, this is kind of touching on the question of like, what do you actually consider to be like conditional? For example, I think Renata is like a pretty strong comp. I wouldn't really call it conditional, but that also doesn't mean like I would play it like every game from any spot. But my range of like when I'd be willing to play some reroll comps such as Renata is like fairly wide. But yeah, the truth is it's pretty nuanced. It's hard to precisely lay everything out. All right, if there's no more questions, thank you everyone who came today. Again, if there's any type of like any kind of like events, kind of like VOD review, whatever that you're interested in seeing in the future, please tell me. You can just like, I don't know, at me, DM me, whatever. Tell me in general, and I'll be looking to host more of these types of things depending on what people want to see in the future. And I think that's all from me. Again, thank you all, and goodbye.